Hey guys, tonight we sail back to a time when the oceans were vast question marks, and one man, neither prince nor pirate, commanded a fleet so massive it made European navies look like bathtub toys. Picture this: the hiss of steam from hot rice porridge, gulls wheeling above lacquered decks, and the scent of pine tar mingling with the perfume of cloves. And at the center of it all, you, shackled, shaved, and very much not in charge. Yet, you're a boy, maybe 10, and everything you know, your home, your parents, your name even, vanishes in a haze of fire and steel. The Ming army has descended on your town in the mountains of Yunnan. You're Muslim, part of the Hui minority, and the new dynasty isn't exactly gentle with the remnants of the old. You're taken captive, marched north, and forced into the kind of service that makes your stomach turn even before you understand it. Let's just say, eunuch school has a very strict no growing up policy. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you listening from, and what time is it there? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're renamed Ma He, stripped not just of anatomy, but of lineage. But unlike most palace eunuchs who fade into drapery and incense smoke, you climb. Not because you're meek, but because you learn. Fast. You speak fluent Arabic, can recite Confucian classics with a dead-eyed glaze, and soon you're running errands for a very ambitious prince named Zheng He. Spoiler, this guy has ideas. Zheng He, one of the many sons of the founding Ming emperor, is a war hawk in a peacock robe. He sees potential in you, not just as a servant, but as a sharp tool in his imperial toolbox. You're loyal, shrewd, and, best of all, invisible in the way only eunuchs can be in palace politics. He makes you his bodyguard. And just like that, you begin to glimpse what it means to move through corridors of power with quiet steps and loud secrets. Historians still argue whether you and Zheng He shared a deeper, more fraternal bond, or whether he just liked that you could keep a sword sheathed until the exact second it needed to flash. Either way, when he stages a bloody coup and topples his nephew to claim the throne as the Yongle Emperor, you are right there at his side, sword dripping, breath ragged, future wide open. You get a new name again, Zheng He. It's more than a label, it's a symbol. He from your hometown, and Zheng, a reward bestowed by the emperor himself. That's not a nickname, that's an origin story. And the perks? Let's say you now travel with your own retinue, wear silks stitched with golden dragons, and carry orders that even governors and generals bow to. You're no longer the stolen boy in chains. You're Grand Director Zheng He, and the world is about to get a taste of Ming steel and style. But beneath the pomp, there's calculation. Zheng He didn't seize the throne just to admire his own reflection in polished bronze. He wants legitimacy, tribute, and awe, lots of awe. And what better way to get it than to send a floating parade of Chinese might to every distant court and coast? That's where you come in. You're summoned to the capital and handed what amounts to a blank check. Resources, labor, timber, even astrologers, all for a secretive naval project that leaves ministers sputtering into their tea. China has never done anything like this before. Frankly, no one has. You're building ships. No, monuments. Each one a palace that sails. By the end of it, you'll command hundreds, some over 400 feet long, 9-masted leviathans with ornate compartments, watertight bulkheads, and quarters for horses, scribes, soldiers, and, why not, giraffes. Quirky tidbit time. Those giraffes? Yeah, we'll get to them. But know this. Giraffes would soon become so tangled with your legend that Ming painters started depicting them like gentle dragons sent by the heavens. And, to be fair, if you've never seen a giraffe before, that's not entirely wrong. But back to you. As the hulls rise from sawdust and sweat, so too does your legend. You're no admiral by birth, but who needs bloodlines when you've got the emperor's blessing and a fleet so big it casts shadows on maps? You walk the shipyards in Nanjing daily, robes fluttering, clipboard probably optional, and oversee an operation so massive it eats forests. Literally. Entire provinces are stripped for timber. Some historians still argue whether the biggest ships could actually sail, or whether later chroniclers exaggerated the specs. But the consensus? This thing was colossal. And the men? You recruit tens of thousands. Navigators from Fujian, cooks from Guangdong, astrologers who argue about Jupiter's mood, and translators who speak more dialects than you have fingers. It's an empire on the move, stitched together by rice, lacquer, and ambition. One day, standing atop the deck of your flagship, you squint into the horizon. The sea smells like rust and possibility. Somewhere out there are kingdoms that have never heard of the Middle Kingdom. You plan to change that. The sails bloom like giant white lotus petals above you, catching the morning breeze as the harbor of Nanjing falls away behind your fleet. It's a sound unlike any you've ever heard. Hundreds of ships creaking, shouting, splashing, flapping, an armada rising like a continent from the Yangtze River. You're not just sailing out, you're announcing to the world that China is awake and very well funded. The Emperor Zhu Di, now the mighty Yongle Emperor, has given you full authority. Not just over the ships, but over their mission. To carry the grandeur of the Ming Dynasty across oceans. To restore China's central place in the world after the Mongol years. And to make sure every foreign king knows exactly who's in charge now. But here's the twist. He doesn't just want gold or land. No, Yongle wants tribute. That sweet, symbolic offering that says, yes, we recognize China as the sun around which the rest of the world politely orbits. You're not invading. You're dazzling. You're not conquering. You're collecting allegiance wrapped in pearls and parrot feathers. Historians still argue whether this was mostly about flexing soft power, or whether Zhu Di was subtly fishing for allies to secure his still wobbly claim to the throne. Either way, you're the spear point. A eunuch admiral with no naval experience commanding a floating palace of tens of thousands. What could go wrong? Your fleet includes everything from giant treasure ships. Seriously, these are nearly twice the length of a standard football field. To supply ships, horse carriers, water tankers, patrol boats, and even some troop carriers tucked discreetly behind the peacock banners. It's part circus, part mobile city, and part very polite threat. Sailing out of the Ming heartland feels like leaving gravity. The sea is a strange, endless scroll. You pass fishing villages where the people gawk and bow. You see clouds shaped like dragons. You dodge typhoons that would swallow smaller fleets whole. Your crew reads the stars, but you still keep a few maps under lock and key. Rumors of strange southern lands circulate in the mess halls at night. Your first destination? The Spice Islands. More precisely, Champa, modern-day southern Vietnam, and then Java, Sumatra, and the Malacca Strait. This area is a swirling pot of Muslim sultanates, Hindu courts, and pirate dens. Your cargo holds are filled with gifts, silk bolts, porcelain vases, lacquered boxes, and scrolls stamped with the emperor's seal. But your ships carry something more potent, a kind of awe. You arrive not with demands, but with drama. Processions, drums, colored banners the size of circus tents, interpreters babbling in Sanskrit, Arabic, and Tamil. You hand out Ming imperial scrolls like wedding invitations and wait for the replies. Some rulers kneel and kiss the emperor's message. Others hesitate. The air here is thick with clove smoke, incense, and tropical rain. You step into palaces carved from teak, where kings wear gold and smell like cardamom. You smile, bow just the right amount, and mention, very casually, the size of your fleet. Most of these rulers, canny, trade-savvy men, recognize opportunity. Ming China isn't here to conquer, but to remember your name. So they trade pepper for porcelain, nutmeg for scrolls, and sometimes their sister for an embassy position in Nanjing. Diplomatic tokens, they say. Very classy. Quirky detail. One local king gifts you a pair of trained dancing parrots who only perform to zither music. They're shipped back to court, and apparently one bites a courtier so badly he develops a lifelong twitch. Still, not everyone is thrilled to see you. You hear whispers, pirates plotting ambushes, local nobles grumbling about Chinese arrogance, whispers that your men have been sneaking off into markets and returning with suspicious tattoos. You've already had to imprison a few for smuggling exotic pets on board. One guy tried to bring back a slow loris in his sleeve. You found it during morning inspection when it climbed onto your shoulder. Honestly, adorable, but still. Orders are orders. You've barely completed this first circuit when it becomes clear. The Emperor wants more. The tribute, excellent. The awe, substantial, but there's a lot of map left. So back home you go through storms and sickness to report your success. Back in Nanjing, the palace is a swirl of brocades and ink. Zhu Di is thrilled. Tribute flows like tea at a wedding. You bring him a rhinoceros, a literal rhino. The court astrologers panic, declare it a killin, a mythical beast signifying heavenly favor. Everyone applauds. The rhino poops on a jade floor. A scholar faints. But beneath the laughter and pearl counting, there's strategy. These voyages let China dominate the trade routes without firing a shot. You've shown that the Ming don't need to beg. Others come to them. Still, your success breeds jealousy. Confucian scholars, long uncomfortable with eunuchs in power, start muttering that these missions are wasteful, indulgent, even barbaric. Historians still debate whether these grumbles were harmless palace noise, or whether they planted the seeds of what would eventually end the treasure voyages altogether. For now, though, you ignore the ink-stained murmurs. You're already preparing for voyage number 2. More gifts, more tribute, more giraffes, possibly. And if the seas have teeth, well, you're bringing cannons this time. The air smells like sawdust and ambition. In Nanjing, the imperial shipyards grind back to life like a hungry dragon waking from a nap. You're back on dry land, but your feet feel like they're still swaying. And no wonder. Zhu Di wants a second voyage, even grander than the first. You're not starting from scratch, but still, what you're about to build defies common sense, fiscal caution, and most principles of hydrodynamics. You're directing what will become the largest fleet ever assembled, by anyone, anywhere, until the modern era. Scholars still argue whether the flagship treasure ships were truly 440 feet long, but even if they were only half that, they'd still dwarf anything the Portuguese or Spanish would build a century later. Imagine a fleet so big that local maps start including your fleet as a coastal feature. That's what you're putting together. Every morning, you walk the docks in your embroidered boots, robe swirling like you're in a historical K-drama. Craftsmen halt mid-chisel when you pass. Carpenters salute with axes. You nod and keep moving, occasionally making a joke about how a beam is crooked enough to scare off a tiger. They laugh. You're terrifying. The workforce? A small city. Tens of thousands of laborers. You've got shipwrights, blacksmiths, potters, cooks, translators, horse trainers, water engineers, and at least 2 men who claim to be experts in eel-based compass calibration. You don't buy it, but it's too good a title to fire them. Timber is dragged from inland forests, floated down rivers, and carved into hulls that rise like temple walls. You've commissioned so much wood, entire regions start complaining about deforestation. That's not an exaggeration. Ming records document vast areas stripped for your enterprise, with local officials writing increasingly panicked reports like, "Please stop taking our pine trees, our people are cold." As for the ships themselves, well, they're not just enormous, they're architectural marvels. Multiple decks, 12 compartments sealed watertight so that even if you spring a leak, you don't end up sleeping with the carp. You've got cabins for ambassadors, stalls for horses, whole kitchens for steaming dumplings in the middle of the Indian Ocean. Your flagship alone could carry 1,000 men, and it does. And, just to put it in perspective, Columbus's Santa Maria, barely a splinter compared to one of your treasure ships. You could probably fit it sideways into your dining hall and still have room for a dumpling cart and a lute trio. The name treasure ships is only partially a poetic flourish. These vessels carry treasures, yes, silks, porcelain, lacquerware, gold trinkets, but the true cargo is symbolic power. Each ship is a floating embassy, a billboard for Ming supremacy, and a not-so-subtle hint that any pirates or uppity local rulers should perhaps reconsider their priorities. Of course, a fleet like this needs direction. Charts, maps, star logs, and navigators who can spot Jupiter and know what mood he's in. You consult maps that would boggle Marco Polo, some showing mythical islands shaped like turtles, others with real ports labeled in 6 scripts. You hold meetings where half the staff speaks Fujian dialect, the other half responds in Persian, and somehow you make it work. There's even a rumor going around the docks that you have access to a secret sea chart, passed down from a Tang Dynasty navigator. It probably doesn't exist, but the fact that you don't deny it only adds to your mystique. Power, after all, lives in suggestion. A quirky detail from this chaotic shipyard period. You commission specialized urine buckets, painted with peonies and dragons. Why? Because someone complains that men are relieving themselves over the rails and confusing dock workers below. Problem solved, imperially. Not everyone is a fan, of course. The Confucian scholars, those paper-clutching wet blankets, start really ramping up their criticism. They don't like eunuchs having power. They don't like spending on foreign theater. They especially don't like that you've basically created your own branch of government with more boats than most countries have people. Historians still argue whether the emperor was genuinely thrilled by your maritime showmanship or just using it to sideline those scholars he found annoying. Either way, you're getting results. Foreign emissaries are arriving with tribute and animals no one in the Forbidden City can identify. A king from Bengal sends you a crystal-engraved throne. An envoy from Siam brings a dance troupe that performs upside down. The emperor loves it. Your enemies at court grit their teeth and draft passive-aggressive poetry about the dangers of salt and silk. You, meanwhile, inspect every final detail. You want ships polished, provisions loaded, and even the ceremonial incense packed in waterproof lacquer cases. You've seen what the ocean can do to a badly secured crate. And when your flagship is finally ready, its sides gleaming, the golden-eyed dragon carved into its prow leering toward the sea, you feel it. This is more than travel. This is ritual. As the new fleet prepares to sail, there's a celebration in Nanjing. Musicians play flutes shaped like birds. Officials line up to bid farewell. The emperor himself sends a silk-wrapped decree praising your loyalty and vision. He names your mission a heavenly tribute expedition. And in the crowd, somewhere near the edge, a scholar mutters, "Yes, but what happens when the money runs out?" You don't hear him. Or maybe you do, and smile anyway. The sails rise again, and the sea waits, glittering like a promise. You sail through mist like a blade through silk. This time, you're more than prepared. Your fleet cuts through the South China Sea like a floating city made of lacquer and iron, bound for even more ambitious ports. You've already been to Champa and Java, but now you're heading deeper into the heart of maritime Southeast Asia, and beyond. Next stop, the Spice Islands, and from there, India. You can smell the change in the air as you pass through the Strait of Malacca, that narrow, dangerous bottleneck choked with shifting alliances and ambitious pirates. Even now, ships vanish in these waters, but not yours. No one's foolish enough to take on your floating armada, not when your smallest supply ship could swallow their fleet whole. Still, you stay alert. You've heard of a pirate warlord named Chen Zuyi, who's turned the port of Palembang into his personal fiefdom. You're not thrilled about sharing ocean space with someone whose idea of diplomacy involves fire arrows and ransom notes. When you arrive, it's exactly as messy as expected. Chen Zuyi tries to play nice at first, welcomes you with a fruit platter, sends gifts that definitely don't smell like tribute. You respond with a polite scroll, stamped with the imperial seal, explaining that piracy is technically frowned upon by the Son of Heaven. Historians still debate whether you offered him a deal first, or just went full Thunder God immediately. But either way, within a week, your ships have turned Palembang into a real-life cautionary tale. Your fleet opens up like a fan. Archers, soldiers, cannon crews, the works. The battle is fast, brutal, and very one-sided. Chen's fleet is shattered. He's captured, sent back to China, and publicly executed. You, meanwhile, are honored for ridding the sea of this cancerous boil on the trade routes. You make it look easy, though you lost good men. But that's the price of keeping the ocean safe for incense and tribute giraffes. Your reputation? Cemented. No one calls you just a eunuch anymore. You're a general, an admiral, a maritime myth already beginning to spread along the ports of Asia. Next, your fleet continues west, down through the Bay of Bengal. You visit Bengal itself, where the sultans receive you in palaces shimmering with colored glass and incense so thick it clings to your robes for days. Here, trade is rich. Textiles, gemstones, spices, and the court is Muslim like you once were. Though your faith has been reshaped by palace life, a thread of it still hums quietly beneath your formal bows and secular protocols. When you pray, you do it in secret, facing west. In Bengal, the gifts are extraordinary. Sapphires, tiger skins, dancers, peacock feather fans, and a mechanical bird that chirps when wounded. But nothing, nothing, prepares you for what you find in Calicut, on the southwest coast of India. The smell hits first. Spices so pungent they practically punch you. Cardamom, cinnamon, pepper, turmeric. You dock in a harbor that feels like a festival. Merchants in silk turbans yelling over crates, parrots shrieking, elephants trundling along dusty lanes. Calicut is no sleepy outpost. It's a trade superpower, a crossroads where Chinese, Arabs, Tamils, and Africans mingle over ledgers and gossip. You meet the Zamorin, the ruler of the region, who greets you with surprising warmth and just the right amount of skepticism. After all, he's used to Arab merchants, not Chinese warlords with ships that can carry villages. You present your gifts. He nods politely. Then you pull out the giraffe. Yes, a giraffe. This lanky, bewildered creature came all the way from Bengal, which got it from the Malindi coast of Africa, passed hand to hand as tribute, bribe, or holy omen. No one really knows. But when you unveil it in Calicut, the court goes nuts. They've never seen anything like it. A creature so strange, so heavenly, that some believe it's a Kylan, a mythological beast that appears only during the reign of a just emperor. You just earned a mythological gold star. Quirky tidbit: the giraffe refuses to enter the palace until you bribe it with sugar cane and recite poetry to calm it down. One of your scribes records the moment with the solemn note: "It has eyes like a sage and walks like a cloud," which, to be fair, is better than what most of your men say. It looks like a drunk camel wearing stilts. The giraffe becomes the star attraction, not just in Calicut, but later when you ship it back to China. It's paraded through the capital like a cosmic miracle. Court artists scramble to paint it with halos. Scholars trip over each other trying to explain how its arrival fulfills ancient prophecies. The emperor? He beams. But back in India, you're busy forging diplomatic ties. You meet merchants from Hormuz, from Mecca, from the eastern edge of Africa. They come bearing news, spices, rumors, and increasingly hopeful looks, because word is out. If you impress Admiral Zheng He, you might earn Chinese protection, trade privileges, and maybe even a jade seal. Historians still argue whether you were acting on hard diplomatic orders or freelancing like an overachieving envoy. But what's certain is this: you're shaping the political map of maritime Asia without conquering a single province. You don't raise flags. You raise eyebrows, expectations, and the odd giraffe. Your fleet turns homeward, not because the mission is done, but because your holds are full of tribute, your crew is sunburnt, and your tigers keep eyeing the goats tied on deck. When you dock again in Nanjing, the emperor throws another celebration. But this one feels different. Grand, yes, but more watchful. Some ministers are starting to ask questions. Why is all this necessary? Who is this eunuch getting all the glory? You sip your tea, smile calmly, and request timber for voyage number 3. Because you're just getting started. The air in Nanjing is thick with incense and bureaucracy. You've barely unpacked your ceremonial robe before palace officials start fluttering around you like startled pigeons. Word of the giraffe has beaten you home. Again. And not just that. News of your overwhelming success in Calicut, your swift justice in Palembang, your diplomatic finesse in Bengal. It's everywhere. The emperor is thrilled. The scholars are concerned. You, naturally, are already drafting a supply list for voyage number 4. But before you sail, you have one very strange delivery to make: the giraffe. It takes 12 men to coax it out of the cargo hold. Its long, puzzled face pokes above the courtyard wall like a curious god. Courtiers gape. Eunuchs drop trays. Someone starts crying. The creature is escorted through the city like royalty, accompanied by flute players, a cart of mangoes, and a man whose only job is to scoop up droppings with a lacquered spade. You guide the beast through the gates of the forbidden city, bowing low before the emperor who waits under a silk canopy. His eyes go wide, not in fear, delight. "Is this the fabled Keelan?" he asks. You nod. Technically, it's a giraffe, but you're not going to correct the Son of Heaven when he's in a good mood. Historians still debate whether Zhu Di genuinely believed the creature was a Keelan, or whether he just recognized excellent PR when he saw it. Either way, the imperial artists rush to capture the moment. Scrolls are painted. Poems are composed. One particularly excitable scholar writes, "Its voice is harmonious, its steps divine. It comes from the lands where stars are born." He later faints from joy, but while the emperor celebrates, not everyone is thrilled. The Confucian scholars are growing louder in their disapproval. They call the voyages wasteful. They call the giraffe an unholy distraction. One particularly salty Mandarin even writes an essay titled "Concerning the Moral Dangers of Maritime Mammals." You ignore them. For now. Voyage number 4 is more ambitious than ever. You're heading to Hormuz, the glittering gateway of the Persian Gulf. It's a key link in the global trade network, a place of silks, incense, pearls, and 1,000 languages. And beyond that, Arabia, Africa, the Red Sea. Your fleet sails once more, banners snapping like dragon wings. You're a familiar sight in many ports now. Children point and cheer when they see your flagship. Local rulers send scouts out miles in advance to prepare proper greetings. And, if anyone hesitates, you casually mention that your ships carry more soldiers than some countries have citizens. Hormuz does not disappoint. A jewel of a city perched on an island of stone and heat, it dazzles with domes, spices, and market squares packed with silk-robed merchants. You're welcomed with flair. Dates, music, embroidered carpets that smell like saffron and goat hair. The ruler greets you with the kind of diplomatic doublespeak you now understand fluently. Flattery, followed by extremely subtle bribes. You offer tribute in return. Fine porcelains, Ming scrolls, and, yes, another small menagerie. This one includes a talking mynah bird that calls everyone Your Highness, which the emir finds hilarious. But you're not just here to trade. You're gathering intel. Every port is a puzzle. Who's in power? Who's plotting? Who wants China's friendship and who fears it? You talk with Arab captains, African traders, Sufi mystics, and one very nervous Venetian who keeps trying to pretend he isn't European. You take notes. Always. Quirky tidbit. While in Hormuz, one of your interpreters gets into an argument with a local astrologer about whether the moon is made of fire or ice. The fight gets so heated they both try to resign. You assign them to the same bunk until they work it out. They later co-author a map of the Red Sea together. From Hormuz, you swing down the Arabian coast. It's a harsh land, sand, stone, silence, but the people are warm. You stop in Aden, where the Sultan greets you in a white robe embroidered with coral. He gifts you frankincense, rare textiles, and a dagger encrusted with gems that you politely admire, then store in a silk-lined crate labeled Pointy Things. The Red Sea itself is both magnificent and maddening. Narrow, rocky, prone to sudden storms. Your pilots are tense. Your ships, wide and unwieldy, move like palaces trying to squeeze through alleyways. And yet, you press forward. Because now you're in reach of something monumental. The holy city of Mecca. Did you go? Historians still argue whether you personally made the pilgrimage, or if it was merely symbolic. Some say you visited the Kaaba, wept quietly, and prayed as the son of Mahadji. Your father, after all, had made the Hajj before you were born. Others say the voyage stopped just short, either for political reasons or to avoid offending the emperor with overt religious overtones. What's certain is this: your time in the Islamic world left a deep mark. You meet scholars who quote the Quran and Confucius in the same breath. You study celestial charts that show stars unknown to China. And at night, standing on the deck beneath the Arabian sky, you feel the strange stillness of a man balanced between two worlds. Imperial China behind you, the deserts of your ancestors before you. Back in China, though, storm clouds are gathering. Zhu Di's health is faltering. The court is fracturing. The Confucian scholars are sharpening their pens. They see you not as a hero, but as a threat, a eunuch with too much power, too much reach, too many friends across the sea. You're summoned back, not in disgrace, but with the unspoken tension of a man returning to a house where the furniture's been quietly rearranged. You leave Arabia with crates of pearls, scrolls of Persian poetry, and one absolutely unmanageable zebra. It kicks 2 sailors and eats half a diplomatic invitation. And, as your fleet turns homeward again, you wonder, not for the first time, how long the waves will welcome you. You're back in China, but the welcome this time is complicated. Sure, the streets still line with gawking crowds. Yes, the emperor still greets you with smiles and silk. And absolutely, someone still faints at the sight of the zebra you brought back. But there's a subtle chill in the air now, like a palace wall has shifted, just enough to cast a shadow where once there was warmth. You feel it in the pauses between compliments, in the murmured discussions that stop when you enter a room, in the way the Confucian ministers now bow just a little too low, mock respect thinly veiled. Still, you do what you always do. You serve. You prepare for Voyage 5. But this time, the preparation is laced with politics. The court has split like a cracked porcelain vase. One side supports your voyages, seeing them as vital to China's prestige. The other sees you as a dangerous anomaly, a eunuch with a navy, gallivanting around the Indian Ocean, spending too much silver, making too many decisions, and returning with too many creatures that poop in imperial gardens. And then, just when the palace is practically sizzling with tension, your moment of reckoning arrives. A pirate king. Or at least, that's what the scroll says. His name is Chen Zuyi. Wait, no, this one is different. The pirate scene is thriving, apparently. This time, the menace is lurking in the Pearl River Delta, near Guangdong, and he's making a mess of Ming trade routes. He's built a network of smugglers, rogue ships, and bribed officials. Think of him as the corporate raider of the South China Sea. And the emperor, tired, aging, and increasingly paranoid, asks you to clean it up. You agree. Of course you agree. But this isn't like your grand diplomatic cruises. This is pure war. And you approach it like an orchestra conductor with cannons. Your ships move swiftly, sleek patrol vessels darting ahead of the lumbering treasure ships, scout boats bristling with archers, and a handful of cannon-bearing craft that you've discreetly upgraded despite the ministry's complaints about excessive boom. Your fleet enters the delta under cover of mist, and the pirate network scrambles. They've heard of you. They've feared you. But now they get to meet you. What follows is swift, surgical violence. Chen's ships attempt a pincer move. You counter with a crescent formation that cuts through their line like scissors through silk. The water explodes in flashes of fire, shattered masts, and the screams of sailors who vastly overestimated their job security. Within 2 days, it's over. The pirate lord is captured and hauled back to Nanjing in chains. You present him to the emperor yourself. The verdict, beheading, in the marketplace, with drums. The message is clear. Trade with China or try piracy, and get your head turned into a moral lesson. Quirky tidbit. The emperor orders a commemorative tea set to mark the occasion. It's white porcelain with little pirate ships painted on it. You receive one as a thank you gift. You never use it. Too tacky. But your return from this mini-war brings something unexpected, something dangerous. Popularity. The people adore you now. You're not just a eunuch or a general. You're a folk hero. Ballads are sung about your victories. Puppet shows depict you slaying sea monsters. Not entirely accurate, but the squid was huge. Parents name their sons Zheng. Scholars grit their teeth. Historians still argue whether this was the moment that sealed your fate. Not any single voyage, but your growing myth. You weren't just admired. You were believed in. And that made you a threat. You see the signs. Budget cuts to the fleet, scholars lobbying for more introspection, less exploration, and whispers that maybe, just maybe, it's time for China to look inward. You're no fool. You see what's coming. And still, you push for one more voyage. Voyage 6. You're older now. The sea has carved lines into your face. Your joints ache. Your crew has thinned. Some lost to storms, others to the boredom of land-based promotions. But when your ship set out again, it feels right. Like home. This time, your goals are quieter. Not conquest, not spectacle, just continuity. You revisit familiar ports, Calicut, Hormuz, Aden. You reinforce friendships, collect tribute, offer gifts, keep the oceanic diplomacy machine humming. And in every port you hear it. Whispers of Africa. A place beyond the reach of current maps. A land of black stone cities, great herds, and golden rivers. Your eyes narrow. You write it down. You don't go there yet, but you will. You also begin to sense something else, something heavy. Your health is failing. It starts with small things. Dizziness on deck, a strange tightness in your chest, dreams you can't quite wake from. You ignore it, of course. You're Zheng He. You've faced pirates, typhoons, and courtiers with poisoned scrolls. What's a little coughing blood between friends? Quirky detail. On this voyage, you receive a gift from the ruler of Hormuz. A clockwork incense burner shaped like a lion. It puffs scented smoke from its nose every hour. Your steward grows so attached to it that he sleeps beside it and insists it brings good luck. The lion survives every storm. Your steward does not. When you return to China once again, the writing is on the palace wall. The emperor has died. His son, the new emperor, is colder, stricter, and most damning of all. He listens to the scholars. Your fleet is grounded. Your records are seized. Plans for future voyages are quietly shelved. You're still celebrated, still respected, but you're no longer needed. Not officially. But you still have one voyage left in you, and it will be your last. The sky over Nanjing is the color of bruised porcelain. You watch it from your chambers, now less command center and more quiet shrine. The treasure fleet is docked, its decks weathering under layers of dust and silence. You trace your fingers along the polished railing of your old flagship, and it feels like visiting a friend in a hospital bed. Everyone tells you to rest. Everyone tells you it's over. But you're not finished. The new emperor, Zhu Gaoji, is no Zhu Di. He's cautious, Confucian-leaning, and, to put it politely, not a fan of expensive naval adventures. He calls the voyages excessive, the treasure ships impractical, and your titles subject to revision. You bow deeply when summoned, speak with respect, and say none of the things you're thinking. And yet, a miracle. The emperor dies suddenly, only months into his reign. Heart attack, stroke, karma. Historians still argue. He's replaced by his own son, Zhu Jianji, a younger, more open-minded ruler. And this new emperor? He doesn't love eunuchs, but he does love stability and tribute, and looking like he inherited a world already in awe of him. So he authorizes one more voyage, one last dance with the sea. You're aging now, Zheng He. Your hair is thin. Your joints sing songs of protest every morning. But when you stand before the dry-docked remains of your fleet, something awakens. The creak of rope, the scent of salt, the call of gulls. It's more than memory. It's identity. This will be the 7th voyage, the final, the largest. Your destination? Back to the Arabian world, possibly Africa, maybe even Mecca if your strength holds. Your orders are simple. Re-establish diplomatic ties, remind the world that the Ming still matter, and collect what tribute is owed. Unofficially, you want closure. Shipyards reopen, slowly, hesitantly. Funds are tighter. Timber is rationed. Some of your old officers have retired, and replacements must be trained. There are debates in court about whether a smaller fleet would suffice. You argue, gently but firmly, that smaller fleets are easier to rob. Your word still carries weight. Barely, the fleet is restored. Not in its full former glory, but enough. Enough to remind the world that China can still send out dragons across the waves when it chooses to. This time, the atmosphere on board is different. The old swagger is gone. The men are quieter, more reverent. There's a sense they're part of something ending. Your steward kneels before departure and asks if you'll be buried at sea or on land. You don't answer. You sail again. South through the usual routes, Champa, Java, across the Indian Ocean. You stop in Calicut, where the sultans remember you. They bow lower than before. They've heard rumors that this might be your last journey, and they send the finest gifts. Ivory, sapphires, a monkey that drinks tea from a porcelain cup, and then throws it at someone's head. From there, you turn toward Hormuz. The wind fights you this time. Storms toss the smaller ships like toys. One supply vessel is lost, dragged beneath the sea like a stone swallowed by a god. You stand on the deck of your flagship during the worst of it, wrapped in thick robes, gripping the railing as if willing the ship to stay upright through sheer memory. Quirky tidbit. During one particularly awful storm, the lion-shaped incense burner from Voyage 6 breaks loose and rolls across the deck, spewing lavender smoke the entire time. The crew takes it as a sign of divine protection. You take it as a choking hazard. Still, you don't stop them from lighting it again the next night. In Hormuz, you rest. Not just because the Sultan requests it, but because your legs tremble more than usual. You keep the pain private, though your physician frowns and mutters ominously into his beard. You wave him off. The local court welcomes you with familiar flair. Pearl-laced robes, carpets rolled like waves, music echoing through domed halls. You receive more tribute. Incense, fine steel, scrolls of poetry. But the real treasure? Recognition. The world remembers you. Still. Then something shifts. One night you collapse. Quietly, privately, in your cabin, surrounded by maps. The stars are visible through the window. You wake up, but not fully. Your physician is silent. Your steward weeps. The admiral of the fleet, your second in command, takes over daily duties. You remain on board, cloaked in blankets and silence, writing something by candlelight. Your will, perhaps, or letters to the emperor, or poems no one will ever read. Historians still argue whether you died in Hormuz or on the voyage home, whether your body was buried at sea, wrapped in silk and slipped beneath the waves, or whether you were carried back to Nanjing in a sealed coffin to be interred in a quiet tomb. Official records are vague, conflicting, maybe intentionally so. What's certain is this: you were gone before the fleet returned. The men speak of it in whispers. One sailor claims he saw a white crane circle your ship 3 times before flying into the clouds. Another insists your spirit appears in the ship's lantern light during storms. Your steward places the lion incense burner on your old desk and lights it every evening until the fleet docks in China. The emperor receives the fleet. He honors your memory with a temple. He sends your name into the official histories, but the tone is muted, almost reluctant. Because not long after the great fleet is dismantled, shipyards fall silent. The treasure ships are left to rot. Maps are burned. Journals vanish. The scholars win. The age of Chinese exploration ends quietly, like a door closing in the fog. But your name? It sails on. The fleet lies dormant now, like a sleeping dragon. The timber rots, ropes fray, and the bustling shipyards that once hummed with life turn silent. You walk past empty docks where your giant treasure ships once towered, a floating empire now reduced to memories and splinters. Back in the imperial courts, the atmosphere has shifted dramatically. The Confucian scholars have reclaimed their seats of power, tightening their grip on government policy. They argue that these costly voyages are distractions from the true path of harmony and order. China should focus inward, they say, on agriculture, education, and maintaining social stability, rather than chasing myths across the seas. Historians still debate if the termination of the treasure voyages was inevitable or politically motivated. Was it a reaction to Zhu Di's death, a reassertion of Confucian values, or fear of the eunuch-led fleet's growing influence? You know the answer is probably a mix of all three. Despite the political crackdown, your voyages left an indelible mark on the world. Ports from Southeast Asia to the Arabian Peninsula still tell tales of the great Chinese fleet that sailed into their harbors, offering silk, porcelain, and the emperor's seal of friendship. You remember a curious detail from your travels. In one small Indonesian island, villagers built a shrine dedicated to the dragon ships that came from the east. The locals believed the fleet carried gods riding on water and honored you as a bringer of fortune. You sent a silk scroll in thanks, but it probably didn't arrive in time. In China, your legacy becomes wrapped in legend and folklore. Children grow up hearing stories of the great eunuch admiral who tamed the seas and brought back wonders from distant lands. Scholars write poems about your courage and diplomacy, though often with a sigh that these were days gone by. Your life also sparks debates centuries later. Was Zheng He a visionary who opened the door to global trade and cultural exchange, or a political tool whose voyages delayed China's inevitable inward turn? Some historians argue that had the treasure voyages continued, China might have discovered the Americas long before Europe. Others suggest the resources spent could have been better invested in defending against northern invaders. Whatever the truth, you become an enduring symbol of China's maritime golden age, a reminder of ambition, exploration, and the complex dance between power and diplomacy. And yet, despite your fame, much of your personal story remains shrouded in mystery. Records were edited, altered, or lost in palace intrigues. Your Muslim heritage was downplayed, your eunuch status often treated as an afterthought. Some argue that your true identity was deliberately obscured to fit the Confucian narrative of the empire. But here, in the quiet moments before sleep, you remember everything. The laughter of your crew, the endless horizon, the smell of salt and spice on the wind, and the feeling of standing at the prow of your flagship as the world opened before you. And, as the night deepens, you realize that no matter what the scholars say, your voyages will always be a testament to the human spirit's desire to reach beyond the known, to connect, to discover. The centuries ripple forward, and your name, Zheng He, continues to surface in the pages of history, art, and memory, like a ship reappearing through morning mist. Across Asia, stories and legends bloom about the giant fleet, the mighty admiral, and the creatures, giraffes, zebras, even mechanical birds, that accompanied you. Your expeditions became not only historical facts, but colorful fables told over fires and in markets. In some places, you are a hero who bridged cultures. In others, a mythic figure shrouded in mystery. Chinese porcelain from your voyages washes up in unexpected corners of the Indian Ocean. Fragments of your legacy scatter like stardust on distant shores. Yet, for centuries, much of the world forgets the scale of your accomplishment. For a long time, Western historians dismissed the tales as exaggerations. Impossible superships, impossible voyages, and an admiral whose story seemed too extraordinary to be true. It wasn't until the 20th century, when archaeologists uncovered shipwrecks and imperial records, that your story began to shine again. One particularly curious find was a massive anchor dredged from the waters near Java, large enough to belong to your flagship, or so scholars suspect. There's also the discovery of Ming-era porcelain shards, far from traditional Chinese trade routes, suggesting your fleet ventured farther than anyone thought. Historians still debate whether your fleet reached the east coast of Africa or circumnavigated the Indian Ocean fully. Some fringe theories even propose that your voyages influenced cultures as far west as the Arabian Peninsula and East Africa, in ways yet to be fully understood. In popular culture, you've been transformed into a symbol of peaceful exploration and cultural exchange. Statues of you stand tall in Nanjing and beyond. Museums showcase replicas of your ships. Documentaries dramatize your journeys with all the flair of blockbuster epics. And yet, in some academic circles, there's a push to balance admiration with scrutiny. Critics question the actual political motivations behind your voyages and suggest that your expeditions were more about imperial power and control than pure diplomacy or exploration. They argue your voyages may have delayed China's industrial revolution by focusing resources outward instead of inward. But in your quieter moments, the way you lived them, there was something deeply human and hopeful about your journeys. You weren't just a tool of empire. You were a man curious about the world, eager to meet strangers, and determined to prove that the vast ocean was not a barrier, but a bridge. Quirky tidbit. In one coastal village in Kenya, a local legend tells of a dragon king who once sailed giant wooden ships with dragons carved on the bows, bringing gifts and peace from faraway lands. They say his ghost still watches the sea during storms. You might smile, imagining that perhaps the spirits of your fleet are still sailing somewhere, forever chasing the horizon. The story of your voyages resonates far beyond the waves, weaving itself into the fabric of global history in ways many only now begin to appreciate. As centuries pass, scholars uncover layers of your impact, political, cultural, economic, and debate how your journeys shaped not just Asia, but the wider world. Your treasure fleet represents a moment when China stood at the crossroads of global trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchange. The routes you carved opened ports from the South China Sea to the Red Sea, connecting kingdoms and empires through silk, spices, and stories. You turned the Indian Ocean into a highway of cooperation rather than conquest. But the larger narrative is more complicated. The Ming Dynasty's subsequent retreat from naval exploration created a vacuum. European powers, Portugal, Spain, the Netherlands, would later flood these waters with their own ships, driven by different motives: colonization, mercantilism, and resource extraction. Some argue that had your voyages continued, the age of European dominance might have looked very different. Historians still argue about your legacy's shadow on global geopolitics. Was your maritime empire a lost opportunity for China to become a world naval power? Or was the inward turn a pragmatic choice, preserving stability over expansion? Beyond politics, your expeditions ignited cultural exchanges that resonate even today. Chinese porcelain, textiles, and cuisine influenced distant lands. Conversely, spices, fruits, and artistic motifs from Africa, India, and Arabia enriched Chinese culture. Your voyages were conduits for technology transfer, religious dialogue, and diplomatic innovation. Quirky tidbit. In the 21st century, a team of archaeologists in Oman discovered a Ming era coin minted during your lifetime, buried beneath layers of sand near ancient caravan routes. The find sparked headlines about Zheng He's footprint in the Middle East, reigniting fascination with your journeys. Your life has inspired art, literature, and even modern naval exercises. The Chinese government launched the Maritime Silk Road Initiative, echoing your legacy as a connector of continents. Yet, your personal story remains, at its core, a testament to the human capacity for curiosity, courage, and connection. As you lie in your cabin on those long voyages, staring at unfamiliar stars, you must have wondered about your place in the vast expanse of the world. Did you dream of lands unseen? Of people whose names you never learned? Of the future that would unfold long after your ships were broken apart by time? Maybe you did. Maybe you didn't. But one thing is certain. Your voyages opened a door through which countless others would follow, transforming the seas into pathways of peace and possibility. The final chapter of your story is both an ending and a beginning, a quiet sunset after a blazing day at sea. Your voyages, grand and unparalleled, closed with the silent dismantling of your fleet, but the ripples you sent out continued to expand across oceans and centuries. You retreat into a quieter life, far from the cheers and drums, back into the corridors of the imperial palace. You become a figure of legend, respected but increasingly sidelined as politics swirl around you like a brewing storm. The eunuch power that helped fuel your rise now becomes a target for reformers and scholars determined to reshape the empire. Your final years are marked by reflection more than action. You write letters, advise younger officials, and look out at the river that once carried your ships to distant shores. You wonder how it all will be remembered. The glittering treasures, the strange animals, the diplomatic triumphs and the battles fought in mist and sun. Quirky tidbit: your personal diary, long thought lost, was rediscovered centuries later buried beneath a palace floorboard. It reveals surprisingly human moments: a sketch of the mechanical incense burner, a recipe for ginger tea, even a humorous complaint about your favorite ship's cook, who could never quite master the art of frying fish without setting the kitchen on fire. Historians still argue about your place in history, whether you were a visionary pioneer or a tool of imperial grandeur. Yet your story transcends these debates. It's about the human urge to explore, to connect, and to leave something behind. And now, as night deepens and your tale draws to a close, imagine the gentle rocking of your ships on calm seas, the soft murmur of waves whispering secrets, and the stars overhead, unchanged witnesses to your journeys. Your legacy isn't just in maps or records, but in the very idea that the world is vast yet connected, full of wonders waiting just beyond the horizon. So, as you settle in for the night, remember the quiet courage it takes to sail into the unknown, and to return, changed forever. Now, as the story winds to a close, feel the pace slow like the tide retreating under a soft moon. The vast oceans you crossed become gentle waves lapping at a quiet shore. The distant calls of exotic birds fade into the hush of night, and the scent of sea salt mixes with warm lantern light. You're safe now, wrapped in the comfort of stories that bridge centuries, places, and hearts. Your mind drifts with the same ease as the treasure ships once drifted on calm waters, steady and sure. No matter where you are in the world tonight, know that the spirit of exploration, the curious spark that drove Zheng He, floats gently in the air, inviting you to dream of distant lands and endless possibilities. So close your eyes, breathe deeply, and let the quiet waves carry you into rest. Sweet dreams, traveler.